I'm going to briefly summarize the story that Malthus told about why humans were just like animals destined to an eternity of subsistence level of living. And there might be brief periods where the level of living exceeded subsistence, but the forces in the system would bring that level right down to subsistence. And this is a sculpture, I'm not sure where, maybe Dublin, I don't know, of I think it's titled Famine. I like it anyway. Well, famine's awful, but the art is captivating. What we need to know is to understand Malthus's view is the basic productivity function, and this is, land of a certain high quality is fixed in supply. You might bring more land into production, but it's going to be worse land, so productivity is going to be lower, average product is going to be lower. Anyway, as the number of farmers increases, the number of grain produced, say, goes up, but at a decreasing rate. Remember, the slope of this function is the marginal product, the amount of grain that results from adding one more farmer. The average product, remember, is the slope of a ray from the origin to any point. At low levels of farmers, average productivity is high, and at high levels of farmers, average productivity is low. The key here is to realize that what people can consume is equal to the average product, right? If we make 500 tons of grain and there's 800 farmers, we get whatever fraction of 500 tons each of the 800 people get. So here's the story that Malthus tells. Let's say we start at B, where we're at subsistence level, poverty wages to farmers. In history, one event that happened was the Black Death, the plague in the 13 and 1400s in Europe, actually killed half the people of Europe. And what we saw is, there wasn't any less land, but there were a lot less farmers, and we saw average wages go way up because workers were scarce. Half of them had died. It was this brutal situation. But what we saw in the aftermath of the plague was this relatively good level of living, a high amount of grain per farmer, a high level of living. Well, what happens is that when we're living pretty well, we're going to have babies, right? This is the Malthusian story. And but as the number of farmers grows, well, the average productivity is falling, and that means the average amount of grain per person is falling, and that translates into falling wages. How far does it fall? Till people are not having so many babies anymore, and because of famine or whatever, and back down to the subsistence. And the story is the same if we think of say an increase in agricultural productivity. Let's say we're initially at B, and now agricultural productivity increases. So we've got 1,600 farmers. We'd be up here. So boom, 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 boom. The level of living is better. So what do people do? They have more babies, and as they have more babies, the average productivity falls, and average wages falls till it hits subsistence. And so that's the Malthusian story. I guess that's all that needs to be said to understand that basic explanation. What the countries where incomes took off achieved was to get on a path where productivity per worker, not largely industrial workers, they figured out a way, because of the way the system was and because of the atmosphere encouraging innovation, that there came to evolve a system, an economic system, where innovation happened so frequently and aggressively that productivity levels just kept rising very rapidly. The other happy event from the point of view of escaping the Malthusian trap is that it turns out as people get richer, and in particular as they move to cities, they tend to want to have fewer children. They invest a whole lot more resources into the few children that they have, but we actually see fertility rates drop fairly fast after citizens achieve a level of living that corresponds roughly to $8,000 or $10,000 a year, which is pretty rich actually by global standards. It's poor in the U.S., but in most of the world that would make you a fairly wealthy person. Anyway, the tendency of people to want fewer children, as well as this just ongoing innovation that boosts worker productivity, has enabled the rich countries to escape. I'll put up a screencast about cross-country differences in economic performance in a moment.